Droitwich, Moorside Edge, Wallasey. All stations that are a shadow of their former selves, their responsibility and importance diminishing by the day. Fulford, Preston, Ashton Moss A. All closed, their futures uncertain. Penmon, Start Point, Ashton Moss B, Saffron Green. Huge transmitters that are all closed and slated for demolition at some point in the future. Ashton Moss B even has planning permission already approved to topple it. So does Penmon. These are just a handful of stations I happen to have visited. But does anyone care? These aging AM transmitters have had their day surely. Why would we ever need them nowadays with the technology we have? Well, let's look at the reason why we may need AM radio more than ever. On Monday the 28th of April 2025 at 10:33 UTC, a major power blackout occurred across the Iberian Peninsula. It affected mainland Portugal and peninsular Spain, where electric power was interrupted for about 10 hours in most of the peninsula and longer in some areas. The power cut caused severe difficulties in transportation systems and essential sectors such as emergency services, as well as telecommunications. It didn't take long before the shops were selling out of batteries, torches and candles, but another item proved vital, and that was a radio. The news reported small shops selling out of radios completely. In Madrid and Barcelona, the news showed people in the streets holding their smartphones up trying to connect to a network. The only logical thing for them to do was to queue up at all the shops for battery-operated radios to get news about the power cuts instead of the readily available news they usually got from their phones. I found it really interesting how quickly people reverted to traditional radios to listen to the news. The power cuts stopped fuel pumps and EV charge points from working. ATMs were down, so people had to use cash to pay for things. Supermarkets were selling out of products and closing their doors. It just goes to show how quickly things descend into chaos when we're left without power. Radio yet again proved to be a vital tool in this world of online digital media and the streaming of entertainment. The Heathrow power cut shutdown on March the 21st really exposed the UK's fragile infrastructure. The fire was caused by a transformer catching fire inside an electrical substation close to the airport, and it caused chaos. The knock-on effect lasted weeks after the 24-hour shutdown, and it got me thinking about how easily a large power outage would cause absolute chaos. News reports are always talking about how weak our national energy infrastructure is at the moment. Let's not forget, a dusting of snow here in the UK grinds things to a halt, so a large-scale power cut would cause us Brits to moan even more. But would we be forced to rely on AM radio in the same way other countries do? Well, it may not matter anyway. Let's look at the state of radio here. The logical method of getting news out to the masses would be the network of AM radio transmitters up and down the UK. They can cover large areas and many operate at many kilowatts of power. The FM network is more localised and fragmented, and keeping it on in its entirety during a power outage is significantly harder and pretty much impossible, but there are plans in place to attempt this. So let's focus on the AM side of things for a minute. Well, it's been ravaged. As I said before, so many large transmitters that cover huge areas are out of action, and even worse, slated for demolition completely. BBC Radio 4, Radio 5 Live, BBC's Gloucester, Somerset, Derby and Cumbria, BBC's Guernsey, Jersey, Wales, Scotland and the Asian network are all still in service off the top of my head. However, the BBC is preparing to switch off its longwave transmissions in 2025, marking the end of a century of broadcasting history. While some dismiss BBC longwave as obsolete, the reports say it's anything but. It's still relied on by rural communities, seafarers and those with limited digital access. The shipping forecast, a maritime staple for a century, still depends on its 198 kHz signal. Public support is growing too. A petition to save longwave has already gathered nearly 5,000 signatures, with listeners from across the UK and Europe describing it as a lifeline and a vital backup in emergencies. TalkSport is still active, but it announced at the end of last year that it would turn off 18 of its transmitters moving forward. So what does that leave us with? a few local Asian stations, a few hospital radio stations, and the odd independent station on AM. In the event of a large-scale power outage, our AM infrastructure is lacking to say the least, and this will get worse as the months pass. It's not like the AM transmitters can be easily repurposed either. They require maintenance not only of the equipment, but the grounds and land within which they sit. They require power and backups in the event of an outage. They need people and manpower in order to remain on air. They require commitment, something that's non-existent. They're carefully designed pieces of equipment too, that really can't be repurposed on other frequencies easily. They're a marvel of engineering, made and tuned to be as efficient as possible on the exact frequency they were designed for. The pieces of equipment you see at Saffron Green aren't here for the fun of it. The second mast at Ashton Moss B isn't out of line for no reason. The huge copper mats under some of them were made for specific frequencies. These design features are all part of keeping them on the frequencies they were made for. Would a private entity, a group of radio hams, or some other emergency service be inclined to snap them up, as I keep hearing people mention? It's a nice idea, but it's extremely unlikely, or else they would have already done so. Here in the UK, and I know parts of Europe are following, AM radio is all but dead, and by the end of this year it'll be a whole lot worse. It's not a viable option for emergency communications, so we'd have to stick to whatever FM infrastructure would remain on air if anything ever happens. Last week, another remarkable story was reported that I think further bolsters the idea that we need radio more than ever. Spying. It was reported that Britons are buying radios in their thousands because they're afraid that Alexa and the likes are spying on them. The chief executive of Roberts Radio said they've seen a recent increase in sales that he puts down to concerns about smart speakers listening to private conversations. He said there's an increased skepticism or nervousness about devices now. Are they always listening in? People have a conversation over dinner and all of a sudden their phone starts prompting them with adverts for exactly what they were just speaking about. If you've got Alexa in the background, or you've got your phone next to you, as we all do now pretty much 24/7, you can't have a confidential conversation or a private thought without suddenly being prompted for adverts. Roberts have claimed growing concerns about privacy have meant some shoppers are now navigating back towards traditional devices again, leading to a pickup in sales. Manufacturers of long-wave and digital radios have struggled to compete with streaming services such as Spotify and digital assistants like Alexa. Roberts Radio itself posted a 1.1 million loss over the year to October 2023 after revenues fell by 3.7 million to 14.7 million. However, Roberts claims that sales have more recently recovered. Cheap Chinese radios are now in abundance too, and with perhaps more FM radios in the home these days, the British public is ready to use them in the event of an emergency. Unfortunately for us, it may be a little too late. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.